All right, thanks for everybody who's joined us. I know we have a few more people coming in from the waiting room, but I want to get started because we have a great program today. I'm Suzanne Basala. I am the President and CEO of the U.S.-Japan Council, and I'm so grateful for all of you for joining us today. For those of you who are not familiar with the U.S.-Japan Council, we are a nonprofit that's founded and is led by Japanese Americans, and our mission is to strengthen the U.S.-Japan relationship. We do that through people-to-people connections and by developing and fostering leaders who can contribute to the relationship in various ways. One of the things I just love about the U.S.-Japan Council is the way our members come up with ideas of things that are important to them and important to the U.S.-Japan relationship, and then take action to make advances on those issues. And today's webinar is a perfect example of that, focusing on COVIDzilla versus Japantown. It's a playful name, but a really important and serious issue. So I think it's a really great opportunity for us all to learn and to share ideas. U.S.-Japan Council would not be able to do the work that it's able to do without the support of our sponsors. So I would like to take a moment to thank our supporters. First, our platinum supporters, including Fabit and the Ford Foundation. Our title supporters, Central Pacific Bank, Hitachi, Ito-En, Mitsui, MUFG, Terasaki Nibe Foundation, and the Toyota Research Institute, which is headquartered right here in Silicon Valley. We also have many of our signature sponsors, and you can see their names as well as the logos of our signature sponsors, and we're grateful for all of their very strong support. Also like to share our premier sponsors. And go ahead with the next slide, please. Okay, I think we'll show that later. So, but these are our signature sponsors, and you can see and if you know these companies, please express your appreciation to them as well. So thank you. Next, I'd like to really welcome the next speaker who's going to give opening remarks, and that's Consul General Toru Maeda, who's the Consul General here in San Francisco. And he arrived in, I think, February, and has spent almost all of his tenure operating in this COVID environment, having to get to know the issues and the constituents and the interests of the region through navigating through COVID. So he's going to have a lot of sympathy, I think, for the topic. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Consul General, for welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. My name is Toru Maeda, Consul General of Japan in San Francisco. It's an honor to join you today. I'd like to thank the U.S.-Japan Council, President Suzanne Basala, and Northern California Regional Co-Chairs, Ms. Rika Nakazawa and Ms. Jackie Funasaki, for organizing this important and timely event. I'd also like to recognize tonight's panelists, Ms. Elaine Kamei, Ms. Grace Horikiri, and Mr. Michael Serra, for their commitment to their communities and Japantowns. I look forward to hearing their insights and interactions with the audience. As is explained in the program, this year marks the 150th anniversary of the Consul General of Japan in San Francisco. In 1870, our office was established as the first overseas diplomatic establishment of Japan, not only in the United States, but also in the world. Actually, the establishment was immediately after the first Japanese immigrants arrived in Hawaii in 1868 and in California in 1869. So we can say that the Japanese American communities in California and our consulate office started our histories about the same time and around the same area in the United States. We have supported each other in the past 1.5 centuries, and the Japanese American community has been an invaluable bridge between Japan and the United States. With such an expansive historical relationship, I feel very close to Japanese American communities, especially in Northern California. Since my arrival in San Francisco, I've been lucky to be invited to join many social and cultural events hosted by the Japanese American communities. And on several occasions, we even co-hosted events together. In my conversation with the community members, they sometimes shared their concerns with me, especially with regard to the difficulties of two Japantowns are facing currently. In the short term, it is obvious that the COVID-19 poses an immediate threat to the lives and businesses of these communities. In the long run, it seems that preserving Japanese culture and Japantowns with the hopes of passing their traditions on to the next generations are becoming common challenges. This webinar is very important and timely, as I said at the beginning, because it is joined by the multiple Japanese American communities in Northern California and others to discuss these two major challenges currently facing them. I very much look forward to the thoughtful and engaging discussions ahead of us. Thank you again for having me this evening.
Thank you, Consul General. I would like to now, well, first let me introduce myself. I'm Rika Nakazawa. I'm co-chair with Jackie for USJC Northern California region. And when Jackie and I were thinking about perhaps the last event for the region for US-Japan Council, we knew that COVID-19 is something that everybody's been talking about. And we thought, okay, and then Jackie mentioned it was a 150-year anniversary. And we came upon the idea that really, and first when I said, well, what about something like COVIDzilla? It was kind of as a joke, really, because, you know, you can see my COVIDzilla behind me here, but it started to take a life of its own and a gravity of its own, because what we had the opportunity to do was to juxtapose something like the ravages of COVID-19 and the impact that it would have on communities, and not just the negative impact, but really about how these communities were really stepping up to the challenge with this new digital paradigm and thinking through new and more progressive or maybe more modern ways, at least today, of how these communities were going to be able to come together. And in light of that, of thinking about what are the steps forward, we thought what a brilliant and perfect opportunity to be able to take that moment to also do a look back. Because I think as we all kind of barrel through our lives, especially in the COVID-19 era, it's easy to lose sight of all the things that have happened in the past, and we should stop and think about those moments and to be able to appreciate them. And as we come together as a community, digital or otherwise, and think about how do our communities sustain to the next 100 years, for example, because these towns that we'll be talking about today, up in Northern California, in San Francisco and San Jose, it's really quite a remarkable story of resilience and sustainability, and how we're going to together fight against something like COVIDzilla. And so with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Jackie, who is my co-chair for Northern California. She's originally from Pearl City, Hawaii, I'm jealous, and founded her second home in the Bay Area after living in Washington State and Fukuoka, Japan. She has more than 10 years of experience in the field of US-Japan relations and currently works in the Economic and Commercial Affairs Division of the Consul General of Japan in San Francisco. Again, I'm jealous. Her role focuses on advising diplomats on issues related to California and Nevada state economic and business environments, renewable and environmental policies, and various technological trends within Silicon Valley. She also serves as a consulate liaison to the Japan-America community. Jackie holds a Master's of Business Administration with a concentration in Marketing and Management and a Bachelor's in International Business with minors in Psychology and Japanese. She is active in the Bay Area community, serves as Vice President of the Hawaii Chamber of Commerce of Northern California, Committee Chair for Nihomachi Street Fair, and Planning Committee Member for San Francisco's, for SF Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. She currently resides in Oakland with her husband, and I am truly privileged, and it's a remarkable pleasure to have a chance to work with Jackie. Jackie, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rika, for your introduction and for kicking us off. And also thank you to Consul General Maeda for your remarks. It's good to hear from you again today. It's such an honor for me to moderate today's panel with these three amazing panelists, Ellen Kamei, Grace Horikiri, and Michael Serra, whom I have the privilege of calling friends. Before we dive into what's happening in our Japantowns and the very scary COVIDzilla monster, I'd like to remind everyone to please submit questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We'll try to leave lots of time for questions since there's just so much to talk about. And also, the audience can't use the chat box, but the panelists will be sharing links during our conversation, so please be sure to check it. Now I'd like to open by asking all our panelists the same question. Thinking about our Japantowns, it's more than just malls and storefronts, but instead neighborhoods based on community. So I'd like to start with the first question, which is, what does community mean to you? And through this question, I hope we're able to learn more about the panelists' backgrounds and motivations and how they ended up doing what they do today. So let's start with our recently married panelist, Ellen Kamei, Vice Mayor of the City of Mountain View and External and Legislative Affairs Manager at AT&T. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you so much for the really kind introduction. I'm 20 days into being newly married, so I'm taking any advice, any and all advice. I also want to thank Consul General Maeda and Ms. Basala, as well as Rika, for the invitation to join the panel. I do wear two hats. One of them is as the Vice Mayor of the City of Mountain View, California. The other is as an External Affairs for AT&T. But I get to talk about something that was one of my first loves, which is San Jose Japantown. I grew up in the community. And when you asked me that question, I was really thinking, what does that mean to me? And it just really means heart. It means spirit with, my family, where I can go and I can say hello to people who have known me since I was 6 years old. And I think in a sense, it's a second home. And that's what makes, to me, San Jose Japantown so special.
Thanks so much, Ellen. And we'll just try to keep the introduction short because we have a lot to go through. So I'll just pass it on to Grace Horikiri, Executive Director of the Japantown Community Benefit District and also Executive Director for Nihomachi Street Fair.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Grace.
Hi, Jackie, and thank you all. Consul General Maeda, thank you, and Rika, Suzanne, everyone, thank you for letting me be able to be part of this webinar. So when I think of, what community means to me, it really means about family, my extended family, my J-Town family. And with that, family relationship, we're always helping each other, being there for one another, being the strength for one another as well. So, especially through these trying times, I think this whole community, the family community, even more so is so important. And I know everyone, but I've always mentioned this before, but I'm on the speed dial for everyone. And that's how family is too. When my dad needs something, I'm on the speed dial. So there you go.
True. Sometimes speed dial for family can be, it has its pros and cons. Okay, so passing it on to Michael Serra, Board President at the Japanese American Museum of San Jose and President at Serra Consulting LLC. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Jackie, how you doing?
I'm good.
So just like everybody else, I'm really grateful for this opportunity. So thank you, Consul General Maeda, Suzanne, Rika, and Jackie for letting us be a part of this. So I'm kind of a unique one, right? I grew up in San Francisco, so I do have that kind of base. But now I've spent most of my time in San Jose. And although I do love San Francisco, I have to tell you, I'm a little biased now. And the one thing that I agree with everybody, right? What's community? And it really has to do with definitely the heart and love of the community, but it's also the cooperation that we have within the community, which I think is just incredible. And what I mean by that is at the museum, if we're running short of chairs or if we need something to do an event, we can easily reach out to another organization and they'll go as far as bringing them to us. And so that's what I feel is part of the community. And we do that for each other. And that's what I love about our community. And then it's also, as everyone else shared, right, being able to walk down the street and being able to say to people, hi, how are you, by first name, right? It's not just some strange area. But I think a lot of that comes by being involved in the communities that we belong to. Because I know for a long time when I was going to school, I was on the outside looking in. But now that I'm volunteering, I feel much more on the inside and I can relate to it much, much better. So I think being a part of it, being an active part of it makes a huge, huge difference as well. So back to you, Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, what everyone said is it's so true. I think we're so fortunate to be in a region where we have 2 of the remaining 3 Japantowns. So I think we're all trying really hard to ensure that we keep them around for many years to come. And with that, let me go back to Grace. Just wanted to ask a few questions and get right into it. So we all are aware of how businesses in Japantown have been impacted by the initial shelter-in-place ordinance. And now as the state reopens, just the huge efforts businesses must make to keep their employees and patrons safe. So Grace, as Executive Director for the Japantown Community Benefit District, what has your organization been able to do for many of these business owners, some that English isn't their first language, who have had trouble navigating the quickly changing reopening guidelines?
Thank you, Jackie. So when March 16th that the shelter in place went into effect, we just kind of looked around and said, we better check in on our small businesses. So the next day, we actually went around to all the essential businesses that were open to make sure they were okay, that they understood all the guidelines that are required of them. And as Jackie mentioned, a lot of our small businesses are not English speaking. Many are Japanese speaking, many are Korean speaking too. So we kind of put our brains together to think, okay, how can we get all this information to them? So we took what the information we received from the city, simplified it for the English speaking, but also translated it for the Japanese and Korean speaking as well. And I think that made a huge difference for many of them. I think many of them were very grateful that we provided that information. And so what we're doing is on a weekly, if not 2-3 times a week, sending out these e-newsletters with any and every update from the city and just sharing that across to them. And it's pretty interesting that that information is also shared throughout the other merchant corridors as well. So it's really all about, getting the information out to them and making sure they understand, all the requirements. And there's a lot of requirements there for them, but they really need to understand so that they can open safely and welcome customers safely too.
Right, and I think earlier on you did some fundraising as well. Could you share about those efforts?
So, again, we were brainstorming and thinking, what can we do for our small businesses? And we said, okay, let's do a GoFundMe page. So, we opened up, we started the Heart of J-Town Resiliency Fund. And I think we started that on May the 26th. And by June, right before a month was over, our goal was $500,000. And we thought, okay, maybe, maybe next year we'll hit that mark. But we, launched it. And with less than a month, we were able to overpass that $500,000 mark. So I was just blown away. Definitely blown away from the support that we received. And, I think the end result to hand over these $5,000 checks to these small businesses, they were just so grateful. I know it's not that much, but I think for them to know that we have their back, I think was equally important too. So it was amazing. I'm just amazed.
Yeah, that number, I just, being able to raise that much money so quickly and to know that it's coming directly from other community members that are wanting to support each other. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So let me ask one other question. So since, all community people seem to wear multiple hats, I also wanted to ask you about Nihomachi Street Fair. Grace knows very well what I was like about 10 years ago when we first met. We met through mutual friends, and I think the next week I found myself volunteering on her planning committee. So I think if if you're a community leader, you need to be a master at recruiting. And I think Grace is truly has that skill. So, with many of the annual events being canceled this year, including the 47th annual Nihomachi Street Fair, how do you think communities have been able to connect even without these in-person gatherings? And do you think there will be lasting changes to our Japantown even after the pandemic?
Good question. So the way folks have been staying connected with each other, of course, is through social media, right? Everyone and anyone's on social media nowadays. And that's how I keep any kind of information that comes out of Japantown, posted up. Folks like Nikkei Weekly, very important, the JCCNC too. And as far as looking at ahead and looking, of course, this year would have been our 47th. I don't know how we're going to figure out next year if we're going to call it our 47th or we jump one more, jump the year and go to 48.
I think we have to just cross out 2020 altogether.
Sooner the better. But our planning committee, and many of them are young people like Jackie, who have committed their time to really make sure that events like this continue, not only for our generation right now, but for future generation as well. And it's good to hear their ideas. The street fair only stays fresh only if we listen to young people's ideas. If we get stuck in, like my age or older ideas, we ain't gonna go nowhere. So it's important for us to always recruit, mentor. It's really about mentoring our young people and showing them what volunteering is really all about, and working as a group, working side by side with leaders. And that's the way I've learned how to volunteer. I've had great mentors in our community like Sandy Mori and Steve Nakajo and many, many others, Jeff Mori. And it's through street fair type events that we get to bring in young people. So, we're looking at other ways right now because we still can't bring in too many folks, into the community. We are kind of, putting all our heads together, not just the JCBD or street fair, but as a community. All the community groups are, talking together and kind of figuring out what else can we do to bring more folks into Japantown. And it's an ongoing conversation. Every time we meet, we think, okay, can we do this? And then we go, no, we can't do that yet. So it's ongoing, but I hope soon that, we can have like mini events that will bring people back to J-Town. I'm really keeping my fingers crossed on that one.
So what are your thoughts for 2021 Nihomachi Street Fair? How has the board met to kind of discuss potential options?
Yeah, we're gonna start planning it, that's for sure. And with the notion, knowing that, we may not be able to have the fair as well, because I've been hearing words from the city that large gatherings may not be able to take place till the summer or so. But, you have to have hope, right? You have to have hope. And we give that hope to our planning committee members too, because, that drives them. Once I say, okay, y'all start planning, then, they get their engine revving and start thinking about a lot of different things to do. So we're going to keep plugging away and we'll just see how it goes. Just plugging away.
We'll be there to support whatever you decide. So I know, for example, Cherry Blossom Festival did a virtual format this year. Was that something that Nihomachi Street Fair was considering, or?
We thought about it, but it takes manpower too. It does take people that know how to run a virtual event online, and all our planning members have jobs, and we just didn't have that time to make that happen. But as part of Street Fair, and Jackie knows this, we have the Aloha by the Bay concert series, which we bring in, award-winning artists from Hawaii to help us fundraise here in San Francisco. And so, even thoughts about maybe we could do a Aloha by the Bay online, fundraiser. So those kind of, thoughts have been going through all the board members' head as well as the planning members. So we're still thinking. It's so many things to think about, but a lot of good ideas too.
For sure. We all just have to kind of go with the flow of things these days.
Definitely.
Thank you, Grace. Now, I would like to ask Michael a few questions since he's based in San Jose. The Japanese American Museum of San Jose is such an incredible resource preserving and sharing Japanese American history. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about the museum and San Jose, Japantown, and what some of the current day challenges are for businesses.
Sure, Jackie, thanks for the opportunity. So some of you may or may not know about the Japanese American Museum of San Jose. So our mission is simple. It's to collect, preserve, and share the Japanese American history, culture, and arts with the Bay Area. And with that mission, we've been having a challenge right now because since March, just like all the other businesses, we've had to shut down. And so what we've had to do is pivot on a digital platform. So everything has gone online. So where we would normally have public programs at the museum and people would come and visit, we've had to shut that down and we've gone to a webinar platform. And so about twice a month now, we're pushing all the content through the web and having these online events. And then we've also had to pivot on fundraisers. And so we used to have our vintage sale and we used to have our winter boutique. But now what we've done is we've taken that and gone to an online auction format. And so later this month, actually in November, we'll have our winter auction that we'll use to do the same thing, fundraise. So that's kind of one of the challenges that we're having. But it's a thing that we all have to do. And then at the same time, we're looking at what are we going to do when we open back up? And because we are a closed environment, we have to make sure that we don't let lots of people in at the same time. And so we'll probably have to do it very gradually and have it on a reservation basis only. And then at the same time, we've also brought in low touch technologies where before everything used to be paper and pencil, where people would sign in and actually hand over cash. And so through the actually help of Ellen's husband, we've now put a low touch kiosk in place. So the visitors can now use a QR code that will be emailed to all of our members that they can just flash and it'll recognize them and it'll allow them to come into the museum. And so that's things that we're trying to put in place so that we can reduce the risk of spread of COVID-19.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love the connections, within our community with Chris.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Yeah, and I just did a virtual event with the Hawaii Chamber, and that's just a whole another beast or monster, if you want to call it. Michael, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about some of the other businesses in Japantown. I know you're very active with the Japantown Community Congress and other organizations. So if you could share how things are going in Japantown.
Sure, Jackie. So, most of the businesses in San Jose's Japantown have had to go to a takeouts. So most of the restaurants, for example, are doing all takeout. So if you want to get manju, you basically have to go there. They'll take your order and then somebody will box it and then they'll hand it to you through another window. So everything is literally takeout. There's a couple of restaurants. So Hukilau and Kazoo have actually started doing outdoor dining. And so where they have space, they've actually set up tables outside so people can come in and dine. They still have their takeout service, but at the same time, they're opening up some of the outdoor dining as well. And then the boutiques, depending on the boutiques, they're slowly starting to open up. I know a couple of them are just doing weekends because most of the traffic is coming in on the weekends. We have Nijiya, which is the supermarket there, and that is open, all day during the weeks. And they have a pretty constant flow. They do have people lined up outside because they're limited on the number of people they can actually let into the store. But that's kind of the situation it is today.
And I understand that San Jose Japantown has a lot of multi-generational stores. So are they all doing as well as can be? There's no talk of any store closures or anything like that.
There isn't now, but there was one store that actually was already planning to close before the pandemic hit. And so they actually, continued on with their plans. Other than that, nobody has. And a lot of people have pushed to an online environment. So a lot of the restaurants, you can order online before you get to the restaurant, or you can call in your order so that by the time you get there, you can just pick it up and, you pay for it and you pick it up and you go. And the merchants are also doing a lot of online shopping. As you mentioned, the new generation is more savvy in that regards. So it's a lot easier for them to do that.
Great. I also wanted to congratulate you on, I think JAMS is celebrating its 125th anniversary this year. Is that correct?
So actually, the museum itself is going to be celebrating 35 years in 2 years.
Oh.
Japantown itself is, as Ellen has her shirt, it's 130 years.
Wow. Okay, I got my numbers completely wrong.
Yeah, that's okay. The San Jose Japantown is celebrating the 130th anniversary.
Amazing.
Yes, it is. Thank you for mentioning that.
So I guess another question, I know in our conversations, with Halloween coming up, you told us how San Jose Japantown is kind of the place to be for families to enjoy and celebrate. But this year, we'll probably be celebrating differently. So are there any virtual events or other ways that, we can support local businesses and also just, I'm sure like you shared how they've had to pivot, but if there's any other future events that are coming up in addition to what might be happening for Halloween.
Yeah, Jackie, thank you very much for asking. So in the past few years, San Jose Taiko has been sponsoring, Halloween in Japantown. And it's an amazing event. I've been going to them, every year now. And what they'll do is they'll block off Japantown. And they'll have a section called Golden Lane, which is for the seniors, and they get to hand out candy to the kids. And then the Wesley Church will take their parking lot, and they'll have trunk or treat, where people will park their cars and have the trunks open, and then they'll hand out candy from their trunks. And they have these cars all made up with different themes, and of course everybody's dressed up. And then the kids come in and they hand out candy there. And then in the middle of Japantown, at the crack of, I want to say 9 o'clock, they do a flash mob. And these people are all practicing. There's a dance studio right there on the corner called Get Down, and they practice Thriller. And so on the night of Halloween, Taiko gets out there and they're playing just like any other normal day. And all of a sudden you hear the music and then turn on PA system. And then everybody just goes into it. And it's just amazing to see. But that's usually what happens. And the other thing you mentioned is one of the things that I noticed, if you go to Japan and during Halloween, it's an adult event. Here, it's a lot of kids going around collecting candy. In Japantown, it's actually a family event. It's a family event, which is really nice to see. You see families dressed up. The parents will be dressed up and their little children in tow, a lot of times in a wagon or something, will be being pulled around, and they're dressed up like their parents. And it's the cutest thing to see. But that's traditionally what happens. This year, what San Jose Taiko is going to be doing is they're going to be pivoting, and they will have an event on the 31st at 5 o'clock, and they'll have performances throughout the night. So they'll be doing, I know Lotus Preschool will be doing a little taiko, and then they'll have the junior taiko performing, and then they'll have the professional group as well performing that evening. So I'll put a link in the chat so everybody can follow that. In addition to that, you mentioned, what else are we doing? And so we will be having an auction at the museum, and so it'll be a winter auction. And what we did was we reached out to the merchants and offered them all a complimentary, basically a spot on the auction so that they can have gift cards or whatever they want to promote and sell. And so that's part of the collaboration that we're trying to have with the community, so they also have an opportunity to participate. So I'll put that in the link as well. But thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. So hearing you speak about, this Halloween event, as well as I had the opportunity to attend the picnic at the plaza with Consul General. I think these are just great events to kind of bring in different people to Japantowns. So I was wondering if anyone could kind of speak to maybe additional outreach or marketing that we are doing for Japantowns to kind of, help bring more business to them so our businesses can, get back on their feet.
You want to jump in, Paul, Grace? Go for it, Grace.
Well, for San Francisco's Japantown, the Japantown Community Benefit District has a marketing and PR committee. And actually in the committee, we have folks from Japan, Japantown Merchants Association, the malls, the hotels, and other folks that are involved. So we think of ways to how to, get folks to come back to Japantown. One of the things that, has been kind of a hit are those Instagram reels, 15-second reels that Vaz Canaris of the Fillmore Merchants Association came in and said, Grace, I'll help you do that. So he took, little 15-second videos of like folks like Paper Tree, Benkyodo, Soko Hardware, Kabuki Springs and Spas. And, we post them up on Instagram, and all of a sudden you see all these comments and likes, and I think it's just making sure that people connect with the merchants. These 15-second reels are really good with letting people know who these small business owners are. So we're going to continue that kind of marketing.
I think the other thing too about this Zoom environment is that people can now join us from anywhere. And so that has really helped, because since everything that we're doing is pivoted on a webinar format, we've also been doing a lot of presentations, and we also do virtual tours now at the museum, because school groups still wanted to have the activity of learning about this history. And since we couldn't do it in person, we've had to do it virtual. And so we've got a lesson plan that we can actually provide to schools that still want to have the curriculum. And that's all we're doing all that virtual. But, having this platform has actually allowed us to reach way beyond the Bay Area. And that's another, I guess, positive, if you want to look for a positive out of this whole experience.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you, Michael and Grace. And now, I know we didn't give Ellen much chance to speak, but I have a few questions for you. And, whenever I think of you and, all your accomplishments, I kind of just want to scream, girl power. But joking aside, when we think about the longevity of our Japantowns, we also need to think about future generations. And I think it's important to address, how do we get more people or more of our youth involved? So Ellen, do you think your involvement in the community helped open doors for you professionally? And what advice do you have for younger generations who are looking to take on leadership roles or potentially even run for political office?
Sure. So I did want to just tack on to Grace and Michael's comments just really quickly, which is, one of the things that I think that they sort of touched on was the communication with the city. So one of the things I know the JBA, the Japantown Business Association in San Jose, did is talk to the city about putting a pause on parking meters, so people don't have to worry about paying for parking to, help generate and support the small businesses. So I think that there's definitely opportunities there. And so that's like a really great way where you might not think about how, civic engagement can touch on your life, but it can, and you can collaborate for positive. In terms of, making sure that the next generation is involved, I think that I feel really lucky that I grew up in San Jose, Japantown, going to Girl Scouts, going to judo, going to Suzume no Gakko, which was a Japanese language program. That when I moved back to California, it was for family reasons, and I wanted to be a part of having an opportunity to be able to provide that for the next generation. And so somebody actually reached out to me about, hey, you're home, have you heard about the Japantown Community Congress of San Jose? And I thought, okay, no. And they said, well, they have this great program called NCI, the Nikkei Community Internship Program. And I just got a new job, and I think it would be great for you to not only join our board, but to take over the NCI program. And, you know, having just came back, I thought, oh, okay, I'll get involved, right? Okay, well, 6 years later, you know, I realized that that was an opportunity to not only kind of bring people back to San Jose, but it was also an opportunity for me to pipeline the next kind of younger board member onto the Congress. So I tried to approach it with making sure that people felt those connections to San Jose, Japantown, because many people who did the Nikkei community internship program were from the area, but they hadn't had the same, you know, interface with Japantown as myself. They hadn't, you know, gone to the church or done Girl Scouts. And so this was their first time, right? And then it was, you know, those trying to get people back to make sure that we have these opportunities for the future. And one of the ways that we tried to do that was creating the New Generation Nikkei Fund. So about 7 years ago, a group of 9 of us got together and said, you know, the donations to our community from our Issei, our Nisei, and our Sansei are not as prolific as it was before. And what are we doing, you know, the mid-20s to 40 young professionals doing? And so we created a giving circle where people donated $25, and we were able to pull together that money. People who donated got to vote directly on grants to our community, and we were able to donate over $70,000 back into our community. So, you know, I think it's all about pipeline and being forward thinking, but also at a level where, you know, that engagement can be there.
Yeah, I was really happy to join NGNF when it was founded and help contribute, you know, at an amount that I was comfortable at. So taking part in philanthropy, you know, you can do that through all stages of your career. And that's something that, you know, didn't really click for me until I saw that organization. So thank you. I also want to just point out that Carol mentioned about the free parking for Japantown. So thank you, City of San Jose. And it's still free. She mentioned that it's still free in Japantown. So please go down to San Jose. And also that the shirt that Ellen is wearing comes in multiple colors, and you can buy it at many different stores in San Jose, Japantown. So
yes, this comes from Roy's coffee, this color scheme. So head to Roy's.
Nice. Also wanted to ask Ellen, so growing up in South Bay, you know, what did San Jose, Japantown mean to you? And what is your hope that it will mean to future generations? And how do we ensure that Japantown is not only preserved, but that we're able to help them thrive into the future?
So, you know, I think that in San Jose growing up, it was a place where we had not only a thriving Japantown, but we also had a lot of community and civic leaders. You know, Secretary Norman Maeda from San Jose, where he was mayor. Congressman Mike Honda, who represented us for a long time, is from the San Jose area. And so I think that not only was it a sense of community and a place where I felt belonging, it was also a place where I felt like I could find my civic voice. And in terms of, you know, being able to continue that for generations, our Japantowns, there's only 3 left in our whole country. And I think that there is an understanding that all of our Japantowns are changing. And in order to make them thrive, we need to change with it, right? And that doesn't mean losing our roots. It doesn't mean losing, you know, our cultural heritage, but it means kind of being open to the innovation, being open to the different generational perspectives. And I think that's something that's important to me, to make sure that, you know, the generation that came before me knows that we are open and we're ready to be helpful and to help take on, you know, the continuation of our Japantowns, and that it doesn't have to be just them, right? And there's a way for us to kind of continue our community together is something that is, I think, appealing for the generations kind of even below myself, right? And how do we do that in, I think, Grace and Michael mentioned, in a family-friendly way, right? So people grow up and they're involved because of whatever activities are centered in your Japantown. You go to college and then you start working, maybe you have a family and you're so busy, right? And so how do we also make it approachable for, perhaps it's not just being you don't have to be the commitment of a board member, but maybe it's volunteering on a subcommittee, or it is volunteering at a certain event. We in San Jose, we have a beer walk, we have a sake walk. You could volunteer there with benefits proceeds coming back into the community. So I think that there's also understanding that it doesn't have to look one way for you to be involved in your community. There's all these different kind of opportunities. And I think it's being encouraging and welcoming, right? I think for myself, yes, I'm Yonsei, but I'm also mixed, right? And I think a lot of my peers are, and it's saying, hey, but she's still Japanese American, right?
Yeah, very true. So true. So with that, let's get into some question and answer, because we have some great questions in the box, the Q&A box. And I don't know if we really touched upon this, so let's start with this one. With each Japantown's divergently evolving cultures, how do your Japantowns define authenticity, and does it matter? How is Japanese American culture of your Japantowns defined in relation to modern Japanese culture? That's a good one. Who wants to start? Okay, someone has to unmute themselves.
So since Grace went the last time, I'll take this one. So yeah, that's a great question. And I think, our mission hasn't changed, but I think to what Ellen said, and we have to broaden our demographics. So we will always be Japanese American history, right? But we also realize that our Japantown was made because the Chinese Americans were actually here before us. And so that is part of the original story, right? So we have to keep that. And then also there was a time when the Filipino Americans were there. So there was a part of Japantown that was Penal Town. And then we have Pastor Bates and his church and his congregation of the African Americans. And so all of those groups make up our Japantown. And so that is part of the story that we're trying to share. And we're doing that through a program we call Hidden Histories. And if you go online, you can actually find it in Hidden Histories. And it's talking about all the different original stories that came out of our Japantown. And that the fact of the matter is that it was made up of a lot of different demographics. And so for us, as we go forward, we will always have the base Japanese American story, but we want to also integrate with all the other stories because they're just as important. The other thing that we're trying to address is it's no longer just one culture, right? It's an immigration story that's much broader. And depending on the time, it can be a different ethnic group. And that's the other thing we're trying to address because it talks to what is happening today. Back to you, Jackie.
Yeah. Ellen or Grace, did you want to address that question? Grace, did you want to?
Well, for San Francisco's Japantown, we're like 114 years old now, right? We had always had a strong tie with the Western addition, with the African American community. And I remember when I was younger, maybe in my teens, there was a lot more interaction back then. And then now I see the younger generation now, they started the whole Japantown for Justice, effort. So it's things like that that I'm, really proud to see our younger folks, kind of reconnecting with the people, our neighbors to the left and to the right. And because, that's it. It just helps all of us come together and have better communication too. There's always going to be challenges and issues, but hopefully with these interactions, we can kind of, help each other out and overcome a lot of the obstacles that are in front of us too. I hope I made sense.
Ellen, did you want to add?
I think that, Michael and Grace provided, really great perspectives. And I think, one of the things that is, I think that one of the things I was thinking about was the, kind of modern Japan kind of part of the question. And, I think that this is our Japantowns, our modern Japan. This is kind of, we are, changing and growing, and we are, all trying to thrive, and we're always trying to be welcoming. But I think we also have a history of being welcoming. One of the things that I learned about when I went to graduate school in Pennsylvania was about kind of the Japanese American and the Quaker relationship. I mean, we've always been with having relationships with different religious groups, different ethnic groups, banding together on key issues like social justice. And I feel like we just we can always do more, and that's how we can honor our history, is thinking about how we do have a past of that practice.
Yeah, I think just within our culture, we've always been good at that balance of respecting tradition, but also trying to evolve and innovate. And I think that is something that is important for us to do within our Japantown. So that was a great question. Another question that I had on my mind too, because I think it might go back maybe a decade or more than I was here from, but this one is asking about, communication between our Japantowns. So even though each Japantown has its own set of issues and challenges, are there currently concrete lines of communication and resource sharing between San Francisco and San Jose Japantowns? What about between Northern California and Little Tokyo, or Northern California Japantowns and other ethnic neighborhoods?
I'm going to start off this quick answer. So back in May, I think, right, Michael, we participated, I think that the Japantown Task Force, the cultural district that, is one of the programs that they have, did a statewide Japantown meeting. And we had folks from San Jose's Japantown, Little Tokyo. I met Kristen Fukushima from Little Tokyo Community Council there, and we still stay in touch. And who I think from Seattle too, someone from Seattle was in there as well. So we had about 30 people at least take part in that conversation. It was really good. I think for me, was the first time to really meet my counterparts throughout Northern California and above. So I'm hoping that this kind of discussion, and hopefully the task force or the cultural district, will continue bringing us all together. It was a great way to just connect with folks. We shared information, and Kristen has called me back and asked me about how we started our GoFundMe page. So it's that sharing of the information that I think is going to be very important for all our Japantowns to continue.
If I can add to that. So yeah, I echo what Grace was saying, but it's funny because Ellen mentioned this. The NCI program actually ties all three Japantowns together. So San Francisco, San Jose, and LA. And we have that through the JCCSJ, so the Japantown Community Congress of San Jose is a sponsor here, JCYC in San Francisco, and then Kizuno in LA. And as a matter of fact, I just had a conversation with John Osaki, who's the executive director over at JCYC, to talk to him about, the program and get his insight on some things. So, I mean, that's how easy it is, right? We can just literally pick up the phone and give him a call and ask him questions. So that is happening real time. And then Nakajo, I mean, he's really good at pulling us together, and he'll come down here, and he also has relatives that work or volunteer at the museum, right? So we're always constantly doing things. He's got programs that he wants to throw down in San Jose. He'll reach out to us. And so that kind of cross collaboration is going on. Could we do more? Absolutely. But there are definitely those pipelines, and it helps also because we have these organizations that do crisscross. The chamber is a good one, right? The JCCNC, which is the Chamber of Commerce for Northern Cal, they support the whole Bay Area as far as north of Sacramento as well. And so they look at San Francisco, they look at San Jose. And so that's also another way to tie to them together. But we have these base programs, and NCI is a great one because it does pull the three together.
Right.
Michael, could you, oh, I'm so sorry. Michael, if you could just explain NCI very quickly.
Sure. It's the Nikkei Community Internship. It's a 8-week program. And we have participants literally from San Francisco, San Jose, and LA. And there's a sponsoring organization, as I mentioned. And what they do is they actually have a lot of college folks apply, and then we have a screening process. And then from that pool of people, they have to trim it down because they're all, given a scholarship when they participate. And in 8 weeks, 1 week is, for us in San Jose, we spend 1 week introducing to the community leaders. They spend 6 weeks with the sponsoring organization, working on something with meeting. And then the last week, they work on a collaborative program where the 3 Japantown cohorts all come together and they work on it together. And it's a great, and then she's proof of the pudding right there.
Thank you, Michael. Sorry, Ellen, please go ahead.
I was also just going to mention that there's a California Japanese American kind of leadership council, and one of their duties is, trying to talk about what's going on in the 3 Japantowns, as well as oversee elements of the NCI program. So, but I think there was also a question about kind of the outward communications, and so I think all of our different nonprofits, at least from what I know of San Jose, they really try to be on social media. They're really trying to create newsletters. They have active relationships with the elected officials who represent Japantown, and they put out information in their newsletters. And so I think those are all ways, and kind of like free ways, for communications to be out there. So just wanted to add that.
Sounds great. Thank you, Ellen. And I am getting the sign that that was our last question. We went through so much today. I think we're very ambitious with this topic, trying to cover 100+ years of Japanese American history and COVID and the future of our Japantowns. But I think we learned a lot. So I thank our 3 panelists, Ellen, Grace, and Michael. And in closing, just as a reminder, there's a copy of the webinar will be posted to the website. And please visit the USJC website if you would like to do so and find out more about future programming. And with that, I'd like to pass it back to our president, Suzanne Basala. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jackie. Thank you for your great job moderating. And thank you, Enrica, for organizing this. And I know everybody joins me not only in thanking all of you, and I want to thank you, obviously, Grace and Michael and Ellen for being with us and sharing your ideas. But truly what comes across to me is how committed you are to your communities, and how much you do to not just support the Japantowns, but just to support the whole community and work together. And so I just feel really inspired. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening kind of feel like, what more can I be doing? You really challenge us all to bring a real contributor mindset to the communities that we're part of, especially in these very, very difficult times. So thank you very much. I learned a lot. There was also a lot of great information in the chat. So I hope people took a chance to see some of the links that are in there. And I saw there were a lot of questions. So I agree, Jackie, there's a lot to cover, and there's more conversations to have probably among the Japan communities. And finally, I can't believe I've lived in Mountain View for the last 3 years. I did not know about Halloween in San Jose. So I'm so delighted to learn about the Thriller and Taiko. Like what a great combination, Michael Jackson and Taiko. So thank you everybody for your time, and look forward to continuing the conversation. We have a public symposium. The information is on our website. Great, and it's on the screen right now, November 17th to 19th. And there's several conversations that are part of the public symposium that are really relevant to talking about NPO sustainability and other community issues. So please check out the agenda, join us for several of the sessions if you can, and continue the conversation. Thanks, everybody.